The Philippines is starting to reopen its borders to international tourists on February 10th. In this video, we're going to talk about what this really means to you, because this whole situation involves pros and cons. So I'm going to walk you through everything that you need to know if you want to travel to the Philippines next month. And I also want to tell you a little bit about the pitfalls, the things you want to watch out for before you travel to the country. As you guys probably know, the Philippines had planned to reopen its borders earlier on in December, but decided to postpone the reopening amid Omicron fears. Here we are again, just 2 months later, and the government has announced that they want to open up the borders to international tourists. Now, you have to know a couple things here. First of all, you're only going to be able to get in without quarantine in the event that you're fully vaccinated and have a negative PCR test. So this is the contingency. The good news is that visitors from over 150 countries, right? The Philippines allows visa-free travel for citizens from over 150 countries. So if you are fortunate enough to be from one of those 150 countries, then you can visit the Philippines without quarantine. This is all very positive. It's also positive for all the ones that have been waiting for almost 2 years to see their girlfriends, wives, families, whatever contacts they have in the Philippines. What everybody is hoping for is that the visa extension that was in place pre-pandemic will be continued. Meaning, if you come to the Philippines as a regular tourist, you get a 30-day tourist visa, which can be extended. I wanted to touch very briefly on a long-term visa option that you may want to consider. Unless you're married to a Filipino citizen, you want to consider some kind of a long-term visa, and the Philippines has a retirement visa. There's a contingency again. You need to be older than 50 years. If you're older than 50 years and they're willing to deposit $20,000 into a bank account in the Philippines, then you can come into the country, you can live in the Philippines permanently. There's no monthly income requirement. It's $20,000 deposited into a Philippines bank account. No income requirement. In case you're 50 plus and you're with income, so you have like a pension, you have Social Security, then a $10,000 deposit would be enough, but you're required to have an income of at least $800 a month. So you have two distinct options here. The Philippines had an early retirement visa program which was discontinued. It allowed anybody above 35 that was willing to purchase real estate to come to the Philippines. Unfortunately, this has been discontinued, and at this point in time, we don't really know if and when the Philippines will add this option again for all those that are younger than 50 years. I have a couple of concerns, and I'm sure you do too. As you probably know, the flight situation around the world has changed. It hasn't changed for the better, it has changed for the worse. A lot of airlines reduced their fleets. There's fewer flights available than ever in my lifetime than anything that I have seen. So if you want to travel to Southeast Asia, it's going to be more expensive. I got some hard numbers for you here. If you want to get on a flight from LA to Manila, there are direct flights available, but they're $2,200. That's as good as it gets. And I know this is not ideal, and the prices have gone up as much as 200 to 300%. Right? So if we compare the prices of today with the prices we had pre-pandemic, you were able to get a flight ticket for what? Like $700, $800. That was a return ticket, right? It was a really good price. But nowadays, this option is just no longer there. You need to be willing to pay a lot more. And in many instances, it has gone up, like I said, as much as 200 to 300%, which makes it a little bit tricky if you're on a tight budget, right? Not saying that it's impossible. So if you're on a tight budget and you don't want to blow a couple grand on a flight ticket to the Philippines, then the best you could do is just wait for a bit longer for airlines to schedule more flights. And airlines that decided to discontinue flights to the Philippines before or during the pandemic may sooner or later add flights again. And the more flights there are, the more competition there is, the cheaper the flights will become. But nowadays, there just isn't a whole lot of flights. And because of that, supply and demand, what's going to happen. The prices are going through the roof. If you want to travel to the Philippines from Europe, You're very fortunate if you can find a return ticket for less than $2,000. I have found tickets here from Frankfurt to Manila, obviously with a stopover. I think it's in South Korea, so you need a flight to Seoul, have a bit of a stopover, a bit of a layover, a couple hours in Seoul, a couple hours in Busan, and then travel to the Philippines. You know, the cheapest that I found was $1,800, but that flight is not next month. So you could easily pay $3,000 or $4,000 here as well. And obviously another thing is the COVID situation in the Philippines. You know, Manila is about to embark on another lockdown, and we don't really know how the situation pans out if a new variant pops up. This is, you know, you're like walking on eggshells here. Nothing is certain. Things can change any moment, any minute. But you going to the Philippines now, yes, you get to reap all the rewards. You get to be with your girlfriend, with your wife, with your kids. You know, if you haven't seen them in a long time, then obviously that's more important than anything. But for somebody that has other options or that is not, you know, disconnected to the Philippines, you may want to consider going somewhere else until, you know, the situation really stabilized. The COVID situation is another problem, and for sure we don't know, you can't say with 100% certainty that the Philippines will indeed open up, you know, on February 10th. Why am I saying this? Because the government has changed its opinion last minute. And I know that a lot of people who had already booked their flight to the Philippines needed to cancel, reschedule, and obviously that's a heavy process. It's not just about the flight ticket, it's also about the COVID vaccine. You need to get a PCR test done, you know, and if you're not vaccinated, you need to book a quarantine hotel, right? So you have all of these expenditures, and in the event that they should not open up, you still had these expenditures, and hopefully you can reschedule and not lose that money. But I know people that lost the money, and it was just not a very pleasant experience for them. What I can also recommend is just maybe wait a little bit. You know, you don't want to be the first person to get into the Philippines, because what happens if plans change last minute? You know, I'd wait until at least a couple days after February 10th to make sure that they are really open, because what if they do exactly what they did in early December, actually in late November? You know, they were supposed to open up in early December, but they changed course last minute, and a lot of people obviously, you know, were not able to go and had to reschedule. That is my recommendation. Do you think the Philippines will finally move ahead with its plan to open to international tourists on February 10th? Are you currently in the Philippines? If so, what's the situation like? Leave a comment below and let us know. Consider subscribing if you haven't already. I highly recommend that you grab a completely free copy of my ebook Nomad, the Insider's Guide to Retaining a Life of Freedom. All you need to do is click on the link below the video. And if you got some more time left, check out these videos. Thank you for watching.